there, and welcome to our weekly craft, a source for ideas, inspiration, and fun for crafters. I'm Sarah White, chief maker at ourdailycraft.com, and today I want to talk about Japanese patterns. This is an example of a pattern that I made from a Japanese knitting book called Japanese Knitting, and I have a crochet book too that I can't find right now, but I have been working on a project from it as well. And so it just seemed like a good opportunity to talk a little bit about what Japanese patterns are, what makes them different, how they're usable by people who don't speak Japanese, and how it's like a different way to stretch your knowledge of fiber arts if you are looking for something a little different. So we'll start here with M is wearing this, which is called Pattern F from Japanese Knitting by Michio, which is called Poncho and Cardigan. Let me find, this is the one from the book, and you'll see that I made mine a little smaller, just because that amount of ease that it called for seemed like excessive for me and how I would wear it. But this is actually really cool, and it's not quite finished. I think I still need some ribbing at the top, but one of the things that's cool about it is you can wear it this way, but you can also, if I can get it off of in here, when you finish the neckline, and maybe that is because it's just got it rolled, it calls for putting hooks and eyes into the neckline, and then you can close up this hole and wear it like a cardigan this way, so that the bottom hem becomes the neckline and the edges, and it's sort of like a cocoon style cardigan, which is hard to describe, but let me find that picture again so you can see the two different ways to wear it. So here she's wearing it like a normal, like a pullover, and here she's wearing it like a cardigan, and you can see that the neckline, it isn't the neckline, the hemline becomes the neckline on the other one, and I thought that was pretty cool. So that's the pattern that I decided to make out of this one. This has a lot of really cute patterns, but the fun thing about this is that and there are a lot of, Tuttle has done in particular, a lot of these books that are Japanese patterns, but they're translated, so they have a little bit of the sort of instruction that you would expect from I like this sweater too, which is just called pullover. They all have not very descriptive names, but and here's a crochet one. But anyway, these books have, a little bit more word type instructions than you would normally find in untranslated Japanese knitting patterns, but there's enough from the pattern itself. This is a really pretty coat too that's crocheted, like a pea coat. So let's go back to the pattern. So this is the pattern for that sweater that I was just showing you. And you'll see that it's mostly schematics, right? It's charts. I don't know if I can get close enough that you can actually read the chart there. But you start here, and it shows, because this is in English, cast on 180 stitches, 2x2 ribbing in main color, and then it says, stockinette stripe pattern, textured stripe pattern, which is in the chart over here, how to do the different stripes. And then there's a mark where the sleeves go, and then it says how many stitches to bind off for the neckline and how many stitches to hold for the shoulders, and it does count out rows or measurements for that, and basically that's really all you need to know. And then here it shows with the neckline what I was talking about, how you put, it says buttons, not hooks and eyes, but you get the idea. It's the same kind of thing. You put buttons underneath the neckline, which I haven't done yet, but you put the buttons here and make little crochet loops, maybe. Yes, chain 4 loops on the other side, so then you can attach the buttons to the loops and close up the neckline when you wear it as a cardigan. I just unearthed this. I knit it like last winter, I think, and never finished. Typical. But I will finish it up and I will show you how that works and how that looks, since I made a smaller one. I'm not entirely certain how the whole switching to a cardigan thing is going to work, but I'm intrigued by that idea. So anyway, this book, as I was saying, it has this little bit of written instructions too, but basically from the chart, since the chart is translated into English as well, you can pretty much follow the pattern from the schematic and then the chart of the texture that's in this one as the patterns. I think I picked that one to do because it was pretty simple and that I felt like I could do it without referring to the written instructions much. And here, like when you get into crochet, it's even easier because if you can read a crochet chart, you can read a crochet chart in Japanese as easily as you can read one in English. And here, you know, I mean, it's got standard charts for things that would be charted in English as well. But typically an actual Japanese knitting or crochet pattern is just basically the charts. Here's a pattern for a bolero, and so you can see how you start here and you just work up, and so you use the measurements on the thing, and it has little symbols. So like here on this one, it has, I'm not entirely certain what the symbol means, but it looks like a yarn over, and I'm not sure that that's what it means, but there's some shaping that's happening, you can see, that's shown on the chart, and it's grafted, so maybe that's, yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think it's a decrease that's happening there. But anyway, so it's like a really logical, graphic way to represent a knitting project, and it assumes that you have a certain amount of knowledge about knitting or crochet, as the case may be, since there's crochet in this one too. That was a good example. You know, like here's one that's a vest that's crocheted, and it shows this is the stitch pattern, and then this is the schematic for the project. That changing of light and dark when I put the book up is a little creepy, but oh well, cameras are weird. And so then it just shows, and see the instructions for this are: use one strand of yarn throughout, following the color key with contrast color 2, begin with chain 140 and continue following the chart for 16 rows, change colors where indicated, work more rows, divide, and then the next row divide for the slit, work the right side for 42 rows. So there's like very little, even the description, the English on these is pretty straightforward and simple, and it's not saying like, you know, what decrease should you use or what, I mean, this is crochet, so that's, you know, how you decrease in crochet is pretty standard, but it's not giving you as much information or as much maybe specific details, is what I'm trying to say. It trusts that you know what you're doing, you know, like if you have a preference for a decrease, you can use that decrease, or, you know, if you like mirrored decreases, you can do that if you're decreasing in different places. See, this one is a little more complicated. It's for a dress and long vest, so it's got a, you know, there's more details in the pattern there because there's like part of it, the bodice is picked up and knit from the waistband up. Yeah, it looks like you start with the waistband. I have a sweater. I designed a sweater just like this. You do the waistband first, and then you pick up stitches down to do the skirt and up to do the bodice. So that one requires a little bit more detail in the pattern. But so these kinds of books, and I have brought another one. There's also from Tuttle. It's called Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible, which is like a stitch dictionary that you'd find anywhere else. But these do have, this is a cool one. I just happened to put these roses, and then in the chart it's like a rose just in the chart. That's funny, but then it does explain how that's done. It's embroidery actually, so that's why it's not described in the pattern. Or like this one has beaded flowers, and so it shows the placement in the chart. That's funny. There's a whole chapter on bead embroidery. There's lace. And so with these, I mean, obviously it's a stitch pattern chart, just like, oh, this is fun. There's round yokes. So you could like design your own sweater from starting with a yoke pattern and then add an edging. I believe this one, oh no, maybe not. I was going to say, I believe this one had, oh, just a few. It has a few basic patterns in the back as well. Where are the pictures of those I'm taking? So like there's this like scarf. There were some socks. There's just a couple of patterns, full patterns, rather than stitch patterns in the back of the book. There's a hat, fingerless mitts, and socks. But again, so like this is interesting, which shows the schematic for a sock. But using English translations of Japanese patterns is really helpful. And they'll also have sometimes a section for special stitches if the pattern doesn't explain how to do, because the patterns typically don't have a lot of instruction in like how the stitches are formed. There might be a chart, but it doesn't exactly say how to do that. But using these types of books, and there are lots of them available, is like an entry point into Japanese design, and they have really lovely designs, like sort of like you would imagine the Japanese aesthetic in knitting would be. It's a lot of like clean lines. There's a lot of boxy things. It's like warm and cozy, and just like this book in particular has a lot of really great patterns. Like I love this striped shawl, which we looked at the schematic for a little while ago. And here's the bolero that I was looking at as well. And here's the that dress. So it's got a cabled waistband, and then you work down for the skirt and work up for the bodice. That's really cute. And then there's just like a traditional sort of cardigan. But you know, it just gives you entree to a different world of knitting design and crochet design that wouldn't have been accessible to us, you know, even like a decade ago, maybe a decade ago, maybe not 20 years ago. Both because the books weren't being translated, and then also that, you know, the Japanese knitting books in Japanese were not widely accessible, and it wasn't as easy for someone who doesn't speak Japanese to be able to translate what needed to be translated, because like measurements and things, which would still be or what little instruction there actually is for the designs would be in Japanese in an actual Japanese book, right? But now that we have Google Translate, and we have, you know, and there's a lot you can glean from the pattern just from the chart too, but you need to know numbers, and you need to know stitch patterns and things like that. But it's easier than ever to, you know, purchase actual Japanese patterns or to find books. I have probably at least 4 or 5 knitting books, and then, you know, like I said, this one actually called Japanese Knitting, but it has crochet in it as well. And then I had started, I wish that I knew where that book is because I'm still working on the project. It's been a while since I worked on this project also, so, and I just pulled out some stitches. But it was for a really big shawl. I think it's sort of an L shape, so it had different, I think it had 3 pieces that you were supposed to work, and so I had started this one. I'm using, it's hard to tell in this light, but it's actually, that's 3 different sort of bulky green yarns that I have, and so I was trying, then I started the second panel because I think it had a, maybe it's not L-shaped, it would be more U-shaped because I think there's a back panel and side panels, and so I was trying to make sure that I had enough yarn, because it is scraps, to make the side panels match, and then the back, you know, if I need to change to blues or use different colors or different dye lots because I'm out of the stuff that I had, then that's fine, you know, or if I need to make it smaller because I'm running out of yarn or whatever happens there, I can do that as well. So, and I think that obviously that's not a thing that's unique to Japanese patterns, but I do feel like they empower people to make their own decisions about things that they're crafting. And so, you know, because there's not as much instruction, it feels like more is left up to the person who's making the garment than that the designer had. Is like, it's weird to be like, because I'm a designer and I like people to, you know, like I wrote the directions, I want people to follow them, right? But I don't want people to feel locked into the decisions that I made, right? I know a knitwear designer who used to joke, I mean, and it's not really a joke entirely, but that people would email her for support, but it would be like, can I make the sweater in blue instead of red? You know, people get, there's something about patterns sometimes for some people that you feel like you have to follow them to the letter, and it might not be as bad as, I can't even knit this in a different color, but you know, is it holding 2 strands of yarn together to get a different weight, or to get the required weight of yarn instead of using the required weight of yarn to start with? Or is it, maybe I want to make it smaller, right? So that it, because I don't think that I want the giant cocoon, and maybe once I wear this a little, I mean, it's already still bigger than me, like it's more ease than I would normally have. I think it's got about 10 inches of ease even as it is, so that's more ease than I would normally choose to have in a sweater. But this is just supposed to be sort of an outerwear garment also. So as I wear it, you know, maybe I'll be like, oh, I actually do want it bigger, or, you know, the decision to make it smaller. And, you know, I didn't feel like that was a huge decision to make, because it was just like, oh, I'm still following the pattern. I just chose to make it a different size. But anyway, I just think that even just looking at some Japanese knitting and crochet books is interesting to see that different approach, and how it feels like, because of that lack of instruction, that it feels like the knitter or crocheter is given more freedom to explore and play within the pattern, because it's not as descriptive, it's not as prescriptive as English language knitting patterns can sometimes feel. And I feel like we've gone completely in the other direction, right? That people want longer patterns, people want more instruction, they want to be told exactly what to do, exactly how to do it. You know, like patterns are so long sometimes. And I mean, it's great that people with different skills and different skill levels and different comfort with patterns, you know, if you're a confident enough knitter, you can ignore all that extra instruction, right? But for knitters who need it, it's good to have it. But I also feel some sort of attraction to the simplicity of a Japanese knitting pattern, and that it trusts you to know what you need to do. And maybe not every knitter's there, not every crocheter is there. I can't read crochet charts. I have not successfully done a project with a crochet chart, I should say. I probably can read crochet charts. I just haven't tried it yet. So that will probably be my next thing, is like trying to do a crochet pattern from a chart. The one I was doing, it's all treble crochet. So there's not really a chart of the stitch pattern, because it's just the same stitch throughout. So that is like an easy, and that's a good way to start with these kinds of patterns, is start with something that looks easy, something that looks doable with your current skills. That's why I picked this sweater, because it was mostly stockinette. It had these little stripes that are textured, but it's just like a knit one, purl one kind of texture. So it was super simple to do. It was pieced. It was just easy. And so that gives you confidence that you can do a harder project as well, right? So that's a good thing. But I would encourage you, if you're feeling a little like you want to try something different, to look at your library or bookstore or online for some translated Japanese knitting and crochet patterns, because I think that you'll find it fun, and it's like a different challenge to think, that you have to think about what you're doing a little bit more maybe than with a traditional English language pattern, but it's satisfying like being able to do that too, right? So I hope that you will check it out. And that's the big spiel for this week. I finished reading Tanqueray. It's a very quick read if you are into the Humans of New York. Stephanie, I can't remember, is it Johnson? I can't remember her last name, but her stage name was Tanqueray. She was on Humans of New York last year, and it was a huge sensation. They raised a ton of money for her to help with healthcare and things in her apartment, I think, too. But Brandon Stanton and she wrote this book it's mostly this, well, I think they said it was 60% new story. It felt like it was mostly the old story with some new stuff thrown in. It will take you about 2 hours to read. It's fun. It's not like earth-shattering new information. It's an interesting story about her life mostly in the 60s and 70s in New York. She did a lot of weird stuff in her life, and it's worth a read. I am also reading Flow, which I will not try to pronounce the author's name. He's a Russian psychologist. And it's really psychology more than, but it's like tangentially related to creativity. In the flow state, we often talk about in writing or creative pursuits, which you can have flow in knitting or crochet or painting or whatever, is sort of that sense of lost time, that sense of being into something that's like bigger than you, tapping into the universal creative force or whatever. And I have always meant to read it. I had checked it out years ago and just couldn't get into it because it's really like, it's not as bad as I remember though, but I felt like it was really kind of dense for a popular science book, but it's not that bad. I have one chapter left in that, which I'm reading sort of for my own education, my own feeling of needing to get, wishing I had more of that kind of flow feeling in my life, but also for a book project that I'm sort of working on. And I'm 70% done with Project Hail Mary, so I'll probably finish that one this weekend too. Yeah, same old books. I do not think I'm watching anything new either. Because I had just started The Dropout, maybe? About Elizabeth Holmes and her fraudulent medical devices. That's what I'm reading. We actually haven't watched any TV all week long, which has been weird. I haven't done any knitting all week long either, for the same reason, because I usually do it in front of the TV, and we just haven't been in front of the TV. So that's a goal for today, is to get some knitting done, and maybe find that crochet book and see if I can do a little crochet too, because I have a problem with treble crochet. I don't think my form is right. I can't do it. Like, I have to push the 2 yarn overs, and I feel like I have to like really push that first loop through that first, I guess it's the second yarn over. It's hard to explain, but my form on treble crochet is not very good, so it's kind of why I wanted to do like this huge treble crochet project, hoping that somewhere along the way I'll figure out how to do it in a way that's more efficient. So yeah, I think that, and maybe it's not Japanese books for you, but like the idea of trying something that's in your craft, but a little different from what you're used to. So, maybe it's buying a pattern that's in French when you haven't had French since high school, or it's using a Japanese pattern, even if it's translated, or it's, using a Japanese sewing pattern. I don't know if I still have, I used to have, I don't think I still have. I used to have a Japanese sewing book as well. And it's the same kind of situation where it's just limited. And I think it was even like you drew your own patterns too, which may be why I don't have it anymore, because I was intimidated by that idea. But I feel like that's kind of a good thing. Like the Japanese way of crafting is instilling confidence in the maker more than maybe the American, European, English-speaking patterns do, because it does give you a limited amount of information and trust that you're going to be able to figure it out. And I don't know that that's like a whole nother discussion, and this is long enough, but the idea of how much pattern do you really need? Is it better to give people the bare minimum and let them figure it out? Or is it better to have all of the possible information and answer all the questions that people might have and give them all the details so that they can make a project that's as close to yours as it can be? Or is it better if maybe theirs doesn't look the same, even though they used your pattern to do it, because they figured things out along the way? And I don't know. And then that's the whole Elizabeth Zimmerman school of, it's a bigger discussion, and maybe that's for next week, but sometime we'll talk about that more generally. But I do encourage you to try something a little different, a little outside of your comfort zone in your craft, and tell me about it if you do. And in the meantime, I hope that you have a great crafty week. Stay cool. It's really, really hot, like everywhere in America and Europe as well. So, wherever you are, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you probably need to stay cool, and our Southern friends stay warm and cozy and in the house with your crafting. And I will talk to you next week.